Marie Curie famously said, "Nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood." The very world of science and research is dramatically shifting with the emergence of generative artificial intelligence. With Google's NotebookLM, as well as many other tools, can we now better understand our fears across our facts?
Welcome to the Grand Challengers Podcast, a show about inspiring individuals who are stepping up to tackle the global challenges that our world is facing in their own unique ways.
This is a special mini-series on Google's NotebookLM, featuring previous guests from the show and insights into the potential and perils of generative AI in science and research.
Join us on not only this little experiment, but also some deeper dives into key topics we have covered on the show so far.
From urban nature-based solutions, climate change, urban planning, ecology, livability, and even perspectives on AI in our urban environment as well.
AI is here to stay, accessing our vast collection of human knowledge, summarizing and synthesizing it, and presenting us with generated words, images, videos, voices, and much more. So join me, Peter Marcus Bach, and my guest on today's episode, Belinda Hatt, on this journey as we explore whether AI is able to tell a connected story across a flood of information and a variety of sources. Please enjoy. Welcome back to the show, Belinda.
Thanks, Peter. It's great to be here. I think that today I'm coming with a lot less hesitation than the first episode. I hesitated a lot when you invited me to come onto the show for the first time. I was thinking about all of the clever and accomplished people that you'd had on your show and found myself wondering, why do you want to talk to me? And I really dragged my heels on listening to the episode after we recorded it because I was convinced that I would sound like an idiot. But in the end, it was a really positive experience with an unexpected benefit that a lot of my friends and family have listened to the episode, and so now they know a lot more about what I do at work.
And it's one of the most listened to episodes on the show, so...
Which still puzzles me.
I think it's got a lot of gems there, so thank you for doing it the first time, and thank you for, I guess, subjecting yourself to my little mini experiment.
Well, I think given the positive experience that we had the first time, I'm bringing a lot more energy and enthusiasm to today and a lot less fear.
So how have you been otherwise?
I am happy to report that I am very well. I'm well. Both my boys are well, my partner and his two kids, all six of us, we're doing really well.
Fantastic. Awesome. And listeners, welcome back to the mini series where we subject Google's NotebookLM to a lot of random experiments trying to summarize our work or work that we're familiar with or work that we're hoping will see the light of day back to us, and we comment on it. So in this episode, we'll be doing something different yet again, where we'll try to throw a lot of different documents at NotebookLM, trying to exhaust it and seeing how well it can tell a connected story around the topic that I think has been very close to you in recent years as well.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to be talking about headwater streams today, and that's an area that I've been spending most of my time working in since our last episode. It's been quite different because a lot of my career I've spent thinking about stormwater control measures or blue-green infrastructure or nature-based solutions, but I've been working less in that technical space, in that design, research and development space, and thinking more about river health, and that's really nice. I really enjoy being in that space. That's ultimately why I care about stormwater management, and so I've been thinking a lot about a really small but large component of river health, and that's headwater streams.
And we'll get to the nitty-gritty details of headwater streams shortly, but I guess for those who are not as familiar, it's really the uppermost part of the river. It's like where the river starts, essentially. And they don't always run wet, or they're not always flowing. Sometimes they're little trickles, but they are incredibly important for the entire river system's health. Did I sort of summarize that definition very concisely?
Perfectly.
Because my next question would be, and this is something we sort of covered on the episode, but I never sort of clarified. Do you enjoy camping at the headwater level or more downstream?
Most of the camping that I have done is on the more downstream parts of the river. Like the larger rivers where they're always flowing, and they're big rivers that you can swim in, fish in, take a boat.
All right. So now that we've clarified that, let's get into the details of the episode. I guess first things first. What's your experience been with AI? What kind of tools have you used and what do you use it for?
Yeah, good question. And with respect to generative AI, I have to admit that up until late last year, I was a real ostrich with its head in the sand. I think from a teaching and research perspective, we've really been thinking and grappling with the question of how do we use generative AI as a learning opportunity and make sure that students don't miss out on learning the important skills that AI might now be doing for them. So that's the University of Melbourne perspective where I work, but Melbourne Water, where I also work, we're a water utility, we operate critical infrastructure. And so there are security concerns associated with generative AI. And so for up until late last year, I was really finding myself thinking, I don't think that's for me. But then I did a leadership program in the second half of last year. And one of the tasks that we worked on as part of the leadership program was a project where we were thinking about generative AI. In particular, how can we harness the benefits of AI for water and the environment while minimising the impacts? And I think two things that I learnt there that really stood out and changed my perspective was that AI as a term is going to disappear. It's just going to be embedded in everything that we do. And that AI is not something for the future. It's here now and it's here to stay. It's not for the next generation, and we all need to upskill ourselves in this space. So the things that I've been using AI for are to help me with coding. I'm a pretty inefficient coder, so being able to use AI to find bugs, find that elusive full stop or comma that's breaking the code or improve the efficiency of my code has been really helpful. Having said that, I haven't been doing a lot of coding recently. I've mostly been writing, and I love writing, but I also don't love writing. Helen Garner, who's an Australian author, I think she describes the writers she knows as experts in neurotic self-torture. No. She says that every page of writing is the result of 1,000 tiny decisions and desperate acts of will. And that statement really resonates with me. I don't know what it's like when you're writing, but I find for me the process of writing is a lot of sitting at the desk, formatting figures and tables and just generally faffing around while you're waiting for the words to come.
1,000 tiny decisions.
But when you do get into flow and the words do come, it's a magical experience, and that's why I love writing so much. But I've been using generative AI to help me explore different styles of writing to those that I have experience with, and to be helping with editing and reviewing. Think at the other end of the spectrum, a PhD student that I'm co-supervising, Vaughan Gray, he's been using long short-term memory machine learning algorithms to predict daily stream flow in the ungauged reaches of our stream network across Greater Melbourne and comparing that to geostatistical algorithms. So AI is having a larger and larger role in the work that I do.
Very much embedded, and I guess, in the spirit of large language models, making the 1,000 tiny decisions for you, because that indeed is how the LLMs work. They try to predict the next word, that comes in a stream of text, to, pun intended. But yeah, and I guess ChatGPT would be a tool of choice, or do you use other LLMs, or is there one?
A little bit of ChatGPT, but at the University of Melbourne, we have an in-house AI. It's called Spark AI. It's ring-fenced to help with IP, help protect intellectual property. So I've been using that a lot. I've been dying to play around with NotebookLM, but I've been holding off using it until after we recorded today's episode.
Yeah, and I guess this will be your gentle introduction to NotebookLM.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Different from how we've done it in the past as well, because this time, unlike past episodes where, I have listened to some episodes in the past before we recorded, but in this one, I basically vetted the content and chose one out of 8 different versions that we will then listen to today. So to get into it, how this works, we basically used NotebookLM. NotebookLM is a large language model built with Gemini 2.5, Google's model, a personalized AI research assistant that helps you distill a lot of, text-based or other kinds of sources into clear and understandable insights. So Google sort of communicates it as a tool for understanding rather than a tool for creativity. It's deliberately built to not hallucinate, unlike many other large language models, although pretty much 6 months into producing this mini-series, it feels like hallucination is a thing of the past, although I think they still do a lot. But what's interesting about NotebookLM is that you can also generate a deep dive podcast with it. And so that's what we did so far in the past 6 episodes of this mini-series. Whereas in the first one, we tried a simple research paper. In the second one, it was a literature review, so a bit more extensive. In the third one, we delved into something a bit more meta, where we had AI explain AI back to us. And in the fourth one, we started to experiment a bit with it. We also prompted AI to focus on the AI topics. In the fourth one, we demonstrated how you can modify the content and the dangers of that in a rather witty, how did you call me? You said you listened to the episode and you called me something.
It's the first time I've ever associated you with being a clown.
Okay. Well, we certainly had fun with that. It was nice to have Martijn back on.
That was a lot of fun to listen to.
Oh, I enjoyed producing it, and I just couldn't stop laughing while editing it. So do check that out, listeners. In the fifth episode, we tested the language barrier, where we used German sources and we got an English summary. And in the sixth and the previous episode, we actually tested how well NotebookLM can produce a biographical piece, where we uploaded sources and the CV, and that didn't quite work out. And so that brings us now to today, where we have decided to do something, well, not similar, but we decided to focus on a topic rather than a person, but using a whole collection of sources, 22 sources to be exact. So the main topic that we are talking about is headwater streams. And so many of the sources that we've used of these 22 are based on this idea or semi-related to the idea. Maybe you can give me an overview of the kinds of sources that you've provided.
Happy to. So the first source that we've given it is the Victorian Water Act. So that's the law, describes the law relating to water in the state of Victoria in Australia, and it provides for the management of the water cycle. And it's over 900 pages. So it's all aspects of the water cycle. It's not exclusively about headwater streams.
So a general overview. Yeah.
We've also given it the Victoria Planning Provisions, which is the planning scheme for the state of Victoria, of which water is just one element. And I'm really curious about how it's going to handle this one. I wonder whether giving it the whole planning scheme might be a distraction and send it off on and derail the conversation. On the other hand, I also wonder whether it will come up with some innovative use of the planning scheme for protecting headwater streams that we've not thought of ourselves. So I'm very curious to see what it does with the Victoria Planning Provisions.
So in a way, very general documents, but we've kind of sort of said, okay, we're going to focus on Victoria, Australia. And in a way, Melbourne Water, based there as well, has done a lot. You've worked a lot with Melbourne Uni, Melbourne Water on the topic. And I guess the topic is really well known. The research around it, Victoria seems to be sort of the place to go if you want to study stream ecology. All right, then we have a few other groups of documents.
We've given it the Healthy Waterways Strategy. So that's a co-designed and shared document that's been developed by a range of organisations and agencies in the Greater Melbourne region that have a responsibility for waterway management, and it sets a long-term vision for managing the health of rivers, wetlands and estuaries in the Port Phillip and Western Port region. And this is where we start to get a bit more specific about headwater streams. We have a specific regional performance objective in the Healthy Waterways Strategy relating to the protection of headwater streams. We also gave it the Victorian Waterways Management Strategy, which is a planning framework for managing the health of Victoria's rivers, wetlands and estuaries, which we collectively refer to as waterways. And then after that, we've given it a collection of 7 journal papers, technical reports and conference papers and presentations that are all outputs from our Headwater Streams research program. And this program includes a mix of fundamental research, knowledge translation, and the development of practical tools that really are aiming to bridge the gap between strategic planning and on-ground action.
So a whole collection of documents, as I said, 22. And that also includes things like PDFs of PowerPoint presentations. One of the reports you mentioned is sort of a design document, so a workshop design document for a particular case study, Aitken Creek to be exact, journal papers, which we know from previous episodes NotebookLM can work with. And then also documents about a data set that you developed, the stream network data set, because it's one thing to try and locate our rivers and so on. But when you look at these little trickles in the headwaters, sometimes this is not documented in the data. So a lot of things related to it.
Yeah, that's right.
So given 22 documents, we have to obviously guide NotebookLM to tell us, what we want to really hear. And so we actually came up together with a few guiding questions, which we would like NotebookLM to focus on. And these include, on the one hand, why are headwater streams important? Why should we care about them? What do we need to do to protect them from urban development? As we'll see, that'll be an interesting interaction because urban development has been a big problem for them. How can the community do their part? And what are some practical steps we can take to protect headwater streams? Now, a lot of these questions were formulated because you were trying to understand the potential of NotebookLM for one particular purpose. Could you tell us a bit about that and the reason behind these questions?
I'm increasingly interested in the role of storytelling in science communication. So as scientists, we're well versed in the use of figures and tables to communicate our findings. And that's really an effective way to discuss our findings when we're talking to other scientists, but it's not always the most effective way to communicate with diverse audiences. One of the challenges with headwater streams, even though the evidence tells us that they make a really large contribution to regional biodiversity and they're critical to the health and function of river networks as a whole. Because they're small and in climates like Australia, they often don't have surface water present for large parts of the year, so they're seen to be dry. For these reasons, they're often not recognised as headwater streams. And they're also generally not home to charismatic species like, say, a platypus.
Charismatic, nice use of the word.
Charismatic. Something that really appeals to the community, helps sort of capture their imagination. So what I'm really hoping to hear today is a really good story about the value of headwater streams and the threats that they're facing and what we need to do to protect them. Really interested in that, learning how to capture the imagination of people and to build community support. This is something that we've been thinking about a lot. How do we build a groundswell of community support so that we can hopefully get to the point where it's just not socially acceptable that streams and rivers get trashed when urban development occurs? I guess similar to in many parts of the world, it's just not acceptable to discharge raw sewage into rivers and streams.
Yeah. And so with that in mind, the other half of the prompt includes telling NotebookLM to focus on the topic of headwater streams, to tell a connected story using all sources, because we are curious as to how well it can tie the documents together, for the sake of the community as well, to make it funny and entertaining, and use analogies, which it's actually really good at, because a good analogy will help you visualize the concept better. And then we included key questions to answer and all these questions. So we'll put the full prompt in the show notes so that listeners can see exactly what we wrote into the prompt box. I think that's always been a bit of a, call it a mystery as to how to prompt NotebookLM to get what you need. Now, what's also interesting since the last episode is that NotebookLM now gives us the option to create a shorter default and longer version. And I've actually generated 8 different versions using all 3 options to see what the variance is. And we've had summaries that span from 5.5 minutes all the way up to 43 minutes. And, we're building from the failure or the semi-failure from the last episode. I also decided to check the different versions that NotebookLM can generate. And we'll go through some of these variants after we've listened to the version I chose. And now we're not going to listen to the 43-minute version. I've done that for you to save you the time. And I've sort of summarized my general impressions of what it can do across these 8 versions. I've picked out one. We'll call it version 4 because scientists like to put certain labels on them. And version 4 is 15 minutes long. And we'll see how well version 4 does and how well my judgment in choosing one out of the whole mix and sort of fares. And then we can discuss what the details are afterwards. Given all these aspects, you've already given us some impressions of what you're hoping to hear. So we're going to listen to it now. Are you ready?
All right, let's give it a whirl.
Let's give it a whirl.
Okay, let's dive in. Think about when you're way up high, past the big famous rivers, keep going right to the very start. It might just be like a soggy patch of ground or maybe a tiny spring or a stream you can just step right over. These little trickles, these are the headwater streams we're talking about today. Often overlooked, but so important.
That's exactly it. They're like the capillaries of the river system, the absolute starting line. They feed everything downstream, the rivers, the wetlands, eventually the bays. But they don't often get the spotlight.
Right.
I've heard the analogy of the capillaries, or at least the lungs. How do they call it? The pulmonary system. I'm not a doctor here.
Yeah.
But I've heard that a lot when we're talking about rivers and trying to teach this topic to students.
Yeah, I've heard that one too. I think that's one that works really well. I think another one that I've heard that really resonates with me in terms of headwater streams comes from Ellen Wall, who's a researcher at Colorado State University. She likens a river network to a tree. And she talks about this idea that when we look at a tree, we tend to see a mass of leaves. And the trees probably won't suffer very much if they lose some leaves, especially if they can regrow. But if a tree loses all of its leaves, the tree will likely die. And so in the same way, damage to headwater headwater streams can negatively affect the entire river system. That's one that really resonates with me.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's see how they explain it. Seems like an interesting way to start. So, Stuart and Martha, take it away.
Right. And for this deep dive, we've got a whole stack of sources. Everything from like the actual Water Act, planning rules.
Yep, environmental reports, strategic plans.
And even stuff on cultural significance. So our mission today is basically to figure out why these tiny streams are, well, secret superheroes, what urban development does to them. It's the kryptonite part, I guess.
Yeah.
And crucially, what needs to happen, big picture, and, down to individual actions to protect them. Hopefully you'll look at those small streams near you a bit differently after this.
Definitely.
So they summarize the questions we prompted them with in a rather different way.
They did, but I like where they're going with this. And I really like that analogy talking about headwater streams as superheroes and urban development as being kryptonite. And it's not to say that urban development is bad.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but there's ways that we can develop differently that benefit both people and nature.
Casual Superman reference. They like the superhero stuff. I mean, when we talked about nature-based solutions on previous episodes, they were multitasking superheroes. So there must be a lot of superhero information in the training data. Who knows?
It's the Marvel effect.
The Marvel, but it's Superman's DC. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Moving on.
Definitely. Let's unpack what makes them so vital.
So why should we even care about these little streams? Ecologically speaking, what's the big deal?
Well, they punch way above their weight, ecologically speaking. The sources really highlight them as critical habitats. For instance, some support really unique species. There's this critically endangered Dandenong amphipod mentioned.
Wow, critically endangered, living in these tiny spots.
Yeah, it relies specifically on the kind of cool, stable conditions you only find in certain headwaters. They're not just smaller versions of big rivers.
So they have their own unique value.
Totally. An individual headwater might not have, as many species as a big river section, but the key is diversity across the network.
So they start talking a bit about the ecology and the Dandenong amphipod. I don't know what an amphipod is. I know in other sources they mention the growling grass frog, which I think is an endangered and protected species across Victoria.
That's right. Yeah, the growling grass frog is a protected species and it gets a lot of attention in terms of potential impacts to its habitat across Greater Melbourne. I like that they've gone and started to talk about the idea around diversity, and that's one of the key things about headwater streams. Each one's really small, and often they don't support a very large, don't have high species abundance or diversity in themselves, but each headwater stream tends to be different from the other headwater streams, and so that's how collectively they make a really big contribution to regional biodiversity. And so the argument is that it is this idea of this death by 1,000 pipes. The loss of any one headwater stream is unlikely to have a large impact, but the loss of many of them will.
And this can happen very quickly, as we'll probably hear from them shortly.
Different headwaters support different species. So collectively, they give a massive boost to regional biodiversity. They're like refuges.
Okay, I like that. It's like they're not the main highway, but more like a network of specialized little neighborhoods, each adding something unique to the whole city of the river system.
That's a perfect analogy. And they provide different things.
What about the ones that aren't always wet? The ones that dry up sometimes?
Yeah, the intermittent or ephemeral ones. They play this really fascinating kind of hidden role. The sources describe them as ecological seed banks or nurseries. So when there's water, aquatic critters lay eggs, seeds get deposited. And even when they dry out, those eggs, those seeds, they can often survive dormant.
Right.
Waiting.
Exactly. Then when the water comes back, life just bursts forth, develops, and can then move downstream to colonize other areas. They hold this incredible potential.
So even when they look empty, they're literally holding the future for aquatic life.
Very interesting way of describing it.
Yeah, and they're kind of onto it a bit, but they haven't got the whole story there. One of the things about ephemeral and intermittent streams is that connection and disconnection, that cycle of connection and disconnection with the downstream network that really drives the retention or the transport of water and resources to the rest of the river network and shapes the river network. So that's something that we haven't heard so far. We may yet hear that. And I think the other thing that they haven't touched on yet, but again, it's early days, is that the evidence that we're collecting is that even when there's no surface water present, there's a lot going on underneath the surface. And so it's really important to not think about headwater streams just as the channel itself, but to be thinking about its connection with the adjacent zones.
So this is where I start to bring in some of my knowledge from other recordings as well. So the focus on the subsurface was touched upon in one of the other versions that I generated. And the reason I didn't use that version is because I felt that they went far too deep and far too long in that particular aspect. So I guess that's the thing. When you give NotebookLM so many sources to focus on, and it has to condense it into 15 minutes like we're listening now, the question is, what does it focus on and where does it, I guess, keep its attention? And attention is really the key word here. I think some of the first papers about large language models was about attention. So it's a term in AI as well. But coming back to, and not to not go into too much detail, coming back to this, I think that's just as much a challenge for us as humans to distill this kind of massive amount of knowledge. Where do we focus our attention?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think about the amount of information that we've given NotebookLM for this audio overview, and I would find it a really big challenge to think about how do I talk about this in 15 minutes.
Yeah. So that same version went into quite a lot of Latin names and other species names and subsurface stuff. So I thought, maybe not as entertaining, but definitely good to know that it can happen, that this information also gets used in the podcast. Let's keep going.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. It really speaks to the resilience of the system.
But it's not just about the ecology, is it? The sources talk about people value, too.
Absolutely. Socially, they're incredibly important for our well-being. They're often the closest bits of nature for people in urban areas, places to, escape the noise, connect with nature, go for a walk, watch birds, to just find some cool shade. They're vital green infrastructure, good for mental health, physical health. Your local natural therapy spot.
Well, basically, yeah. Or a community hub. They really matter for quality of life.
My local spot definitely needs protecting.
Yeah.
And culturally, the significance sounds really deep.
Oh, immensely. The sources stress this point, especially for traditional owners like the Wada-Wurrung and Woiwurrung peoples mentioned in this region. Their connection goes back tens of thousands of years. Waterways are absolutely central to their culture, their stories, their identity.
It's woven right in.
Completely.
So they went from ecology now to the human and cultural values. I saw you sort of make a facial expression when you were trying to pronounce the traditional owners' names.
Yeah, they didn't get it quite right. And so the two traditional owner groups that NotebookLM mentioned are two groups in the Port Phillip and Western Port region. So the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and the Wada-Wurrung.
Well, sounded similar, but
not too bad.
We know how it does with foreign languages or foreign terminology from episode 4.
You and Martijn had a great time laughing at some of the Dutch pronunciations.
Yeah. So, not perfect, but seems to pick up the importance of it, at least making an attempt.
Yeah. I like that they're going down the path of thinking about the benefits to people. I think that's a really important part of the story. And, I think that's what helps build the business case for protecting headwater streams, because ultimately protecting headwater streams means managing stormwater very differently to the way that we manage stormwater. It means keeping most of the stormwater out of the headwater streams. But in doing so, that creates a whole lot of opportunities that have benefits to livability. So thinking about urban greening and urban cooling and creating more public open space and increasing opportunities for connection to nature, which there is increasing bodies of evidence of how critical that is to our health and well-being.
No, definitely. And so I think the concept of, as you mentioned, very much the water-sensitive urban design, sponge cities sort of principles, which will play an even bigger role in places like Melbourne because the drainage systems are separate. So the stormwater goes directly into the receiving waters. And so this will probably be something we want to look out for, because if community wants to do their part, this is probably one way of going about it. Let's see how they progress.
And of course, these places hold meaning for many other cultures too.
That adds such a profound layer. It's not just a resource, it's identity. Okay, so what about the economy? How does a tiny stream connect to dollars and cents?
Well, collectively, the health of these entire catchments, starting with the headwaters, directly impacts essential services. They contribute significantly to the water supply for millions of people. They support agriculture, industry, our whole way of life, really.
Ah, right. The ecosystem services idea.
Exactly. The sources frame it like that. These streams provide fundamental benefits that underpin the region's livability and prosperity. Think of them as the tiny, crucial pipes and filters keeping the whole economic engine running.
Okay, so let's bring this home for you, the listener. Your drinking water, the local park you wash the dog in, the overall health of the environment, even places like the bays downstream.
It's all connected back to these headwaters. What happens way up there where the streams are smallest, it really does ripple outwards. The health of the start influences the health of the finish line.
Which is worrying, because the sources seem pretty clear that how we develop our cities is, well, it's the kryptonite for these streams.
So we're 1/3 in. It seems like they've sort of made this into chapters, and we've just completed the first chapter, which I think also aligns quite well with the first two questions. Why are headwater streams important? Why should we care about them?
Yeah, I think so. And I like that they've sort of rounded off that first chapter with talking about the connected importance of headwater streams. And I think that can be a really powerful story to tell, that even if these small systems that often don't have surface water present in them, that don't support fish or platypus, if that's not something that you can really identify with, if you care about the larger rivers at the lower ends of the river network, so rivers like the Birrarung in Melbourne, and I meant to look up the name of the river that flows through Zurich before we came into this recording, and I forgot to do it, so I don't have that local name. But even if you care about those larger rivers that you perhaps interact with more frequently, if you care about those, then we need to protect headwater streams.
No, indeed. Although I'm very curious how that works in Switzerland, and maybe, as a stream network or stream specialist, you can sort of shed light. So the river in Zurich is the Limmat, and actually gets fed by Zurich Lake, which gets its water then from the cycle among the glaciers and the groundwater. So
yeah, okay, and it's a natural lake.
Yeah, natural lake.
I'm showing my geographical ignorance here.
But as someone who moved to Switzerland a few years ago and looked at it, it actually surprised me that the lake was feeding the river. Normally it's the other way around, but you see that a lot in Switzerland. So it's very fascinating to see things turn on their head. But nevertheless, I think generally we have to protect the sources wherever our streams are getting their water from, because they're so vital to whatever happens downstream. It's a trickle effect or cascading effect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's see how they now tackle the kryptonite, as they said.
Yeah, that's where the story takes a concerning turn. Urban development is flagged as a major, major threat.
So what's the core problem? The sources talk a lot about impervious surfaces.
Right. Basically, stuff water can't soak through. Roads, roofs, car parks, pavement, all that hard stuff.
Covering everything up.
Exactly. And the sources mention concepts like total imperviousness, TI, that's just the total percentage of a watershed covered by this stuff. But even more critical is effective imperviousness, or EI. That's the bit that's directly connected to the streams.
How so?
I like it.
Like through pipes?
Precisely. Rain hits your roof, goes into the gutter, down the drain pipe, into the street gutter, into a stormwater pipe, and boom, straight into the nearest creek, often with zero treatment.
So even my driveway, if it drains straight to the road and into the gutter, that's contributing to EI.
Yep. It's like we've thrown this giant non-absorbent tablecloth over the landscape.
That's a good visual.
It's not something I've ever heard before, but ever thought of, a giant impervious tablecloth.
Amazing, huh? I think I had to take the sacrifice to listen to this and I guess lose the surprises for the sake of having a nice version to comment on, because we're really, in this episode, unlike the previous one, we really wanted to get one of the best summaries. But yeah, I thought that was an amazing analogy because, you just see this visual of someone just spreading out a tablecloth over the landscape, and it's like maybe there's bumps and kinks everywhere, and that can represent the city. But essentially, that's what it is. We're paving over the natural surfaces.
Yeah, and I liked when Martha said boom when she talked about the sudden connection, and I think that's really nice because that's exactly what happens. That all of a sudden, all of this water that would never have made its way into the stream is being discharged very frequently and at rapid rates, and it's that physical disturbance that's creating so many of the problems at the core of so many of the problems for urban waterways. Yeah, and I guess the key concept here, effective imperviousness, or other terms for it, directly connected imperviousness. Something that, we teach in urban drainage and hydrology to sort of make people aware. It's not just, the total paving. It's actually dependent on what part of it is linked back to the downstream end. And some solutions as easy as just simply disconnecting your roof from the drainage system. And I think that's a really important part, because the reality is that cities are always going to be more impervious than a natural landscape. They have to be. There are ways that we can make cities more pervious, thinking about porous pavements and sponges. But a crucial part of better managing stormwater is breaking that connection between the impervious surfaces and the waterways.
Precisely. And so I think that's a nice concept to bring in early. And let's see if they take that further. But for now, let's see what happens to the tablecloth.
A very leaky tablecloth, though.
Leaky in the wrong way. Instead of soaking in slowly, rain hits this tablecloth and just rushes off super fast. This rapid, concentrated runoff is a huge issue identified in the sources.
The classic runoff problem. More water, faster.
Exactly. And this causes what the scientists call flow stress. The streams get hit with these massive, unnatural pulses of water during storms. This erodes the banks, scours out habitats, changes the whole shape of the stream. And then between rains, flows can actually be lower because less water soaked into the ground to seep out slowly.
Got it.
It completely messes with the natural rhythm.
We discussed this on your episode as well. You completely flip the natural hydrologic cycle on its head.
It does. And it's something that I think, we're getting our heads around it more and more, that it's not just a pollution problem. It's a physical disturbance problem as well.
The alteration of the natural shape and alignment of different river systems, or channels as we call them.
Yeah.
It becomes more channelized as a result.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's not just clean water rushing down, is it?
Oh, definitely not. It's like a pollution party heading straight for the stream. Runoff picks up everything from the streets and land.
Ugh, like what?
Sediment from construction sites or bare soil, excess nutrients from fertilizers, or maybe leaky sewer pipes, and this whole mix of emerging contaminants.
What falls under that?
Things like microplastics, pesticides from gardens, pharmaceuticals that wash off, bits of metal from cars, all the gunk from urban living. It all gets washed straight into the waterways, often completely untreated, especially in areas with high effective imperviousness.
It's like flushing the city streets directly into the creek. Grim.
Pretty much.
Grim.
Pollution
party. Do we have all the attendees?
A whole lot of attendees that we'd not like to invite.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do describe, in teaching this, that we have a whole range of different types of pollutants. So, what better way to describe it than as a party?
I'm going to use it in my lectures from now on.
Ah, there you go. I'm glad that it's giving you some ideas for your lectures. Which it's really good at. We've had some really good analogies in the previous episodes. And now when we explicitly tell it to give us more analogies, it's doing really well. And it's not going overboard.
I'm really liking it. I think it goes back to that, that reliance, that tendency to perhaps go as a scientist to go into that safe space, relying on figures and tables. It's something that we know, it's a safe space. But being able to tell stories, I don't think I'm a particularly good storyteller, but I'd like to get better at it. And doing things like this, I'm loving it.
Yeah. The only thing missing now is a disco ball, which we won't get, unfortunately, spoiler alert, but would have completed the picture. Pollutants dancing on a tablecloth. Let's see how it goes from here.
So it's not just where we build, but how we build and manage the land that's causing such damage.
Are there other threats mentioned?
Yeah, the sources touch on others too. Invasive plants and animals are a big one. They outcompete the native species along the banks and in the water. Physical barriers too, like badly designed road crossings or old weirs that stop fish and other critters from moving up and downstream.
Right, blocking their paths.
And then layered over all of this is climate change. Changing rainfall, maybe more intense storms, longer dry periods, and rising temperatures just add more stress.
And there's another challenge, isn't there, about actually knowing where these streams are?
Yes, that's a really critical point raised. Many of the true headwaters, especially the really small ones, the ones that only flow sometimes, or even streams that have been buried in pipes, they often aren't accurately mapped.
So we don't even have a full picture.
It makes it incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I like that it's gone to that point. And this is one of the first things that we did in our Headwater Streams program was to update our maps of our regional stream network. And we went from about 8,000 kilometres of our river network to 25,000 kilometres of river network. Not all of those new streams that we've added to our network are headwater streams, but a large majority of them are. And the mapping problem is a global problem. The mapping scale that is most common across the globe, it's about 1 in 25,000. That misses maps of river networks of that scale, miss the majority of headwater streams. And that's really problematic because we can't measure or protect what we do not know exists.
That is very true. And this is the sources about the data set that it's starting to pull into the conversation, highlighting that it's not just an urban development problem. And it's really setting up the scene for, I guess, really the question, what do we need to do to protect them from urban development? It's answering the question, why is urban development such a concern? And it's actually gone into not just, the stock standard things we teach, like, urbanization, impoverishedness, etc., and pollution party. But it's also talking about how we're modifying the river networks themselves with weirs, and how we're disrupting the local biodiversity with invasive species as well through this.
Yeah, and it also picked up on the fact that a lot of headwater streams, because they're small and they often don't have water present in them and they're not recognized as streams, they're instead mistaken for natural depressions in the landscape and the perfect place to put a stormwater pipe. So they become a part of the underground pipe network, or sometimes increasingly more replaced with enlarged constructed channels that are capable of conveying the larger volumes of runoff that are generated by urban areas, but their natural form is lost.
Yeah, all of this in 8.5 minutes so far, so pretty impressive.
Doing well.
Doing well.
If you don't know exactly where they are, how do you properly assess their health? How do you measure the full impact of development nearby? How do you target protection effectively?
It's like trying to fix a problem you can't properly see on the map.
Exactly. It really highlights why the standard ways of managing rivers, which often focus downstream, just aren't cutting it for these headwaters.
Okay, so it sounds pretty dire, but there must be plans, strategies, what the sources say needs to happen.
Yeah, thankfully it's not all doom and gloom. There's a clear recognition in the sources that the old ways aren't working and we need a shift.
So it's not all doom and gloom. Seems like they're about to go into solutions, which is good because 9 minutes in, you kind of want to have something left over to answer these questions.
I think it's doing a really nice job of setting the scene, building the suspense for what's coming next.
Yeah, and it's saying, the current ways of doing it doesn't work, but hey, we have solutions coming right up.
And I think that that's a really important part of storytelling, isn't it? To not just come with a problem, because that can be very bleak and can be disengaging. It's like, oh, it's too hard, I can't do anything about this. But to be presenting a problem and then talking about a way forward can be really effective.
So let's see what solutions it's suggesting.
The call is for a much more integrated, multifaceted approach. Action at all levels, government strategy, community efforts, individual changes.
Let's start with the big picture stuff, the strategies. You mentioned the Water Act and planning rules.
Right, they form the foundation. The Water Act manages water as a public resource, including thinking about water for the environment. And the planning system is seen as a really key tool. The sources suggest specific things, like formally designating headwaters as important areas needing protection, giving them status.
Like putting them officially on the map is valuable.
Exactly. As critical landscape features for all their values, environmental, social, cultural, the lot, it gives them more weight in planning decisions.
And can planning rules help buffer them from development?
Yes. Using the planning system well means things like requiring proper setbacks, those buffer strips of vegetation when new development happens nearby. Keep construction impacts further away. But crucially, planning also needs to tackle that runoff issue, the tablecloth problem.
Ah, right. Getting water to soak in, not just run off. How?
The tablecloth problem. I think we need to start propagating that term. That sounds cool.
I'm really interested to see where it goes with the tablecloth problem, but I actually want to pull it back a bit because I really liked that they talked about designating streams, having them on maps, part of the planning scheme, thinking about buffer zones around the streams as well. I think that's really important both for the protection of headwater streams, but also for giving developers certainty so that they know when they buy a piece of land and they invest and develop it, that they've got some certainty about what they can and can't do with that land before they make the investment decision.
I think, what's not on the map, what is not marked, cannot be managed, as we said previously, and especially when you have a developer coming on board. I think the planning scheme sort of says a few blanket rules that need to be kept in place. The integrated water management part of it and the Water Act as well. But really being location specific, I think that's where we're just missing the data at this stage, or the data slowly trickling in. So let's see how the tablecloth problem unfolds.
The sources really push for better urban stormwater management. Shifting away from just piping water away, ASA, the focus needs to be on managing stormwater close to where it falls. Capturing it, treating it, reusing it, or letting it infiltrate back into the ground.
That sounds like water-sensitive urban design, or WSUD.
Precisely. making our cities act more like sponges, less like concrete slabs. The goal is reducing that directly connected imperviousness, the EI, so less polluted water hits the streams so fast.
Making streets and yards part of the solution. What else at that system level?
Restoring and maintaining the vegetation along stream banks, the riparian zone is flagged as absolutely key. Those plants filter runoff, stabilize banks, provide vital habitat. There's a need for investment here, often working with landowners because they manage so much of this land.
Partnerships seem important.
Very. And strategies also cover managing that flow stress we talked about, maybe allocating specific water for environmental needs, plus programs to tackle pollution at its source.
Okay, so that's the policy and infrastructure angle, but you said community and individual action is vital too.
Absolutely critical.
I just couldn't help but remember that Stuart seems to always be there for comic relief or for random deadpan comments just to break up Martha's very eloquent explanation of all the concepts.
Yeah, although it was interesting, and I've noticed that as well in the previous episodes, but the episode didn't start that way, that they've fallen back into their general modes.
Their general modes, yeah. Stuart actually was very good at the start, doing all the explanation. I don't know when they switched, but that's something I have to listen out for eventually. All right, solutions at the higher level, system level, as we say. They brought in the Water Act, they brought in the planning rules, maybe not as explicitly, but I think they're starting to bring in a lot of these documents again.
So they're starting to get more specific, and I'm really liking that they're talking about the idea of partnerships, that the importance, and that's one of the challenges with managing waterways and managing water in general, that there's so many different organizations and agencies that have a role and responsibility. There's so many moving parts, and no one agency or organization can do it on its own.
No, indeed. And so water-sensitive urban design, back to the principles of WSUD, or, well, that's how they like to call it. We
go even lazier in Melbourne. We don't say WSUD, we just say WSUD.
Yeah, we all do, just like on episode 4 with Martin and I. We were, I guess, rather disappointed that it didn't catch on to that, even though it managed to catch on to Verco's acronym in episode 3, which it somehow, I don't know. Maybe it has a preference there.
I suppose, though, that WSUD on paper, it's not automatic that you're then going to pronounce that as WSUD.
Insider joke, tacit knowledge, something that AI, I think, hasn't quite picked up on yet.
There's no vowel between W and S. We shouldn't be saying it that way, but we do, because
Maybe.
W's too long.
Maybe that's why. All right, let's see what the other solutions look like.
The sources are really clear. Governments can't fix this alone. Community involvement is essential for success. People can get involved with local environmental groups, friends of groups, land care. They do amazing hands-on work, planting, weeding, monitoring.
Becoming stewards for their local creek.
That's exactly the idea. And citizen science programs like Water Watch are fantastic. They get people out collecting real data on stream health, which builds knowledge and connection.
So people can contribute directly to understanding the problem.
Yep. And engaging in local planning processes is another way.
A little curious as to where it's talking about community groups and citizen science is certainly something that is covered in the Healthy Waterways strategy. But in terms of our specific headwater streams programs, I can't recall anything in any of those papers that call that out as an action.
Interesting. So it's sort of fusing the general approaches from the Healthy Waterways strategies with the topic of headwater streams now.
Yeah, I think so. Because all of those things are really important. We have targets in the Healthy Waterways strategy. And I think that we do in the Ideas for Aitken Creek report, which is our report where we trialed a co-design approach to develop practical, innovative solutions to protecting headwater streams in a case study, Aitken Creek. I don't think even in that we talked about community. It almost sounded like there was a call for, in a way, discharging some responsibility to community.
Oh.
And I'm not sure. That was how I interpreted what they said then. And I don't know if that was quite, if I've interpreted it correctly, but kind of like, I'm not sure that that's quite the message that is in our papers.
Well, I guess they said governments can't do it alone. And I think that's key. So I think this has been the general level of the community topic across the different versions that I listened to. Because admittedly, the other versions, you had versions that went deeper into the biodiversity. You had some that went deeper into the technical aspects. You had some that were very localized. So they kept referring to a lot of specific locations which I think for a general listener is very difficult to follow. And you had some that actually referred explicitly to the documents by name. So, if you're trying to understand where the information is, that's a useful recording. But for the overall story, it was very difficult to really follow. But I think in terms of community, it's sort of been balanced across all the recordings. And so, I guess that's something that might need prompting or additional prompting.
Although I suppose in fairness, we did give it a specific prompt. What can community do? And now that I think about it a little bit more, one of the papers we developed a framework for thinking about how you transition from a very beginning state where you may not know what headwater streams are, why they're important, you may not even know where they are, through to a target state where integrated protection of headwater streams and realizing other benefits along the way is business as usual.
Yep.
And there is an element of that framework that does talk about community involvement, and that could be from advocacy, from community advocating for the protection of waterways and headwater streams, through to traditional owner-led management and community knowing what role they can play.
Peculiar section, but potentially explainable. AI generally isn't explainable, but at least we are sort of figuring out why it's saying these things, which is also useful.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's picked that out of the huge amount of information that we've given it, that it has been able to find that and talk about it in a coherent way.
Yeah. So let's keep going. That was an interesting checkpoint to, I guess, do a reality check of the generated story, which has been really good so far.
Having your say on new developments near waterways, making sure these values are considered. Plus, the sources mention the growing importance of networks that bring indigenous knowledge into management, which is vital, given that deep cultural connection.
That collaborative approach sounds much more powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, what about practical things? What can someone listening right now actually do?
Several key things come through. First, think about your own property. How does water behave? Where does it go? Can you reduce paved areas? Maybe put in a rain garden so water soaks in instead of running off? Capture rainwater in a tank? These are all WSUD principles you can apply at home.
Turn my yard into a mini sponge.
Essentially, yes. Reduce your contribution to that damaging runoff and the pollution party.
Got it. Well, what else?
Minimize using fertilizers and pesticides in your garden. That prevents those chemicals washing straight into the drains when it rains. If you're lucky enough to have land near a stream, protecting the existing native plants along the bank is huge, and planting local native species there is even better.
Beefing up that green buffer.
Right. Also, helping control invasive weeds and pests in those streamside areas is a big help, often something volunteer groups work on. And even just when you're out enjoying a waterway, be mindful. Stick to paths, avoid trampling sensitive bank vegetation, clean your boots so you don't spread weeds.
Simple stuff, but it adds up.
Definitely. And finally, advocate for smarter design in your whole community. Support things like water-sensitive urban design and biodiversity-sensitive urban design. Think streets designed to absorb water, not just shed it. Green roofs. Permeable pavements, making the whole neighborhood part of the solution. The sources hint at exploring these ideas for specific areas, showing it's possible.
I was actually thinking when I was listening to this that one way of sort of promoting sensitive urban design is to use the ABCs. Because you got the biodiversity sensitive. I know there's climate sensitive, except water's all the way at W, so we have to find a few more letters to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, we've got soil sensitive urban design, and that's a concept that comes up in the Ideas for Aitken Creek report, thinking about how do we better manage our soils through the urban development process.
J's a bit tough.
I really liked that part of the discussion then. I think that there was a range of actions that people could take that are really quite practical
and simple,
but accessible as well. And so depending on your level of interest or capacity, it made it really set it up as like, oh, there are things that I can do that will have a meaningful impact.
Yeah. And in traditional storytelling, in a way, if you're storytelling with a goal in mind and we're getting to the end, we're down to some of the last minutes, it's really the call to action section. And it also touches on the last question in our prompt, which is what are some practical steps we can take to protect headwater streams? So it's very elegant the way they've sort of weaved it together and now are ending on these final bits. And I can tell you the last part is really trying to tie it all together and summarize it again. So let's see how that fares.
So from your own backyard to your street to the whole catchment, there are ways for everyone to chip in.
It really requires that shift in thinking, doesn't it? Seeing how our built world connects to the natural world, right from those tiny trickles at the very top.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. To recap, headwater streams. Small, yes, but fundamentally critically important.
Yep.
Unique habitats, boosting biodiversity, huge social and cultural value, underpinning economic services like water supply. They do a lot.
But they're under serious threat, mainly from urban development, all that hard surface creating damaging runoff and pollution.
And the way forward isn't just business as usual. It needs integrated strategies, laws, planning, better stormwater tech, but combined with community action, citizen science, and those practical steps individuals can take.
It really strikes me, though, that challenge you mentioned earlier, protecting something vital, when, as the sources say, many of the smallest ones, the hidden ones, aren't even properly mapped or understood.
It does lead to a bigger thought, doesn't it?
Yeah. It makes you wonder, if we struggle to really see, map, and value these tiny, hidden but crucial parts of our environment, what other vital connections, what other overlooked systems, maybe even in society, might we be missing? What does it really take to recognize and care for these hidden engines that keep everything else running?
That's definitely something to chew on. A provocative thought to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the surprisingly big world of headwater streams. Maybe next time you're out and see a tiny creek, or even just that damp patch where it all begins, you'll see it with slightly different eyes.
I don't know why, but somehow I felt like Stuart changed his voice into
It was a slight
advertising voice towards the end.
Yeah, it was much more. Well, not actually. I was about to say it was much more polished, but they are very polished in their speech all the way through.
No,
but yes, as you say, yeah, much more marketing speech. Maybe it's like the difference between commercial radio and community radio.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But either way, what did you think of the generated deep dive and this version that I chose? I mean, you didn't hear the other ones, but what did you think of this?
I really liked it, and I would like to admit at this point that, you know me, I'm somebody who likes to listen to something and go away and think about it and then come back with a response. So having to do a live response now, I'm in a slightly uncomfortable space, but let's see how we go. I really liked the way that they wrapped that up at the end and really reminded us of the key points and finished with a message of hope that there is a way forward.
Which is important for storytelling. It's trying to say, hey, you've learned this.
Oh, I sound like Martha saying absolutely.
Yeah. Adopting their mannerisms now. Yeah. So I think that's something that was very important to look out for, because if you tell a good story, you obviously want to build up to it. You want to build that understanding, and you want to come in and sort of show the resolution that it's not all doom and gloom. And that was explicitly mentioned. And then, finish with the takeaway or a few takeaways, which I think they did really well.
Yeah, and I think that was a really important thing, to give some tangible actions that are linked to meaningful outcomes. And I think that that's really important because we tend to have such busy lives and so many pressures and demands on our time and our resources that it can feel overwhelming to be like, oh, what? I have to do something else as well on top of everything that I'm already doing. But to be given tasks that are relatively small and simple and don't necessarily require a large investment of time or money is really important.
I think it's incredible to see how they can then really distill from 22 sources these few actionable tasks, knowing that the point is to distinguish between the different levels of management, system level, but also community level, and to match the tasks with the level.
And I really liked that they talked about how there is a role for everyone to play, not just the agencies and the organizations that have a responsibility, a mandate to manage stormwater or river health, but there's a role for everybody to play, and in various ways. And it sort of talked about how they connect together to create a meaningful whole.
Yeah. Accuracy of the content, 22 sources. I mean, we can't scrutinize every single thing, but overall,
I think it was pretty good. And there wasn't anything that they said that was like, oh no, it's derailed itself. I think it did a really good job. I'm actually really impressed with what I heard. To be honest, I'm a little bit puzzled by the plastic tablecloth analogy. It was funny when I first heard it, but then in the end, they sort of kept talking. I was like, oh, maybe they're going to explain what they mean. But I mean, I get it. The plastic tablecloth doesn't allow water to soak through it in the same way that roofs and roads and pavement doesn't. But I can't quite see how that's then connected to the drainage system.
Yeah. That's an interesting reflection of the analogy it used. I think it's a quick visual. You can see someone spreading a tablecloth and you can immediately envision the speed of it, because that's, I think, key here. When you urbanize, everything gets faster and flashier.
Yeah, a lot of water spilt on a table and all the water running off the sides. I guess it's the same way we can think about water running off all of those hard surfaces into the drainage network and straight into streams and rivers.
And yeah, the tablecloth was trying to explain the land surface covers rather than the actual drainage itself. So
yeah.
But it's good to know that despite 22 sources, lots of information, it somehow did not derail itself, as you said. I think that's a good way of putting it. Nice analogy, Belinda. But I guess, did it cover the core expectations? So we had a few questions. I mean, my personal opinion is I think it did, but let's go through them one by one. So why are headwater streams important? I think it covered that quite well.
Yeah,
right?
I think it did a good job. It talked about the importance of headwater streams in their own right, but also for the health and function of river networks. So it really it got that one right. Which
ties also into why should we care about them? It brought in the cultural, the social aspects, the economic aspects. So really the sustainability lens.
Yeah. Yep. It wasn't just talking about the environmental value of headwater streams. It was also talking about the social value, economic and cultural value. Tick.
What do we need to do to protect them from urban development? And how can community do their part? I think it really went into the different levels. It started to bring in some of the existing documents, but made a very clear point that the way we're doing it traditionally just doesn't work.
That's right. Yeah. And it really talked about that business as usual doesn't work. And then it started to talk a little bit about some of the concepts of water sensitive urban design and biodiversity sensitive urban design and how we can use those concepts to develop urban areas in a way that benefit people and nature.
Yeah. And then finally, what are some practical steps we can take? I really liked those very simple steps. I mean, we've commented on that a lot already. So I think it's ace that.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and I think I also like that it touched in on climate change, because we know that climate change is going to exacerbate the impacts of urban development. And when we look at our models, it paints a pretty bleak future if we don't shift away from our business as usual urban development.
And we didn't prompt it for climate change explicitly, but it still felt the importance of bringing it in. And it was nice that it did, because the documents would have pointed that out.
Yes. Yeah. A number of the documents refer to climate change and the challenges that is going to bring.
Exactly. So if I didn't tell you this was AI generated, would you have believed me?
I think I've listened to all of the episodes of the NotebookLM Mini Series so far, and no, I wouldn't know that it wasn't. Apart from there was one glitch. Now, I can't remember who it was with, but there was one slight audio glitch where I think it was Stuart's voice changed slightly in I think it was episode 4, and that's the only time where I've kind of gone, oh, that's a bit weird. But for the most part, I've just been blown away by the audio overview function, and I find myself thinking, wow, if only I was so polished and articulate. Maybe there's something in that. Maybe, if anything, it's a little too polished. I think some of the podcasts that I listen to, those real conversational style podcasts, there's evidence of humans there. There's mistakes, there's slip-ups, there's gaffes, and there's none of that in this. But, maybe it's just like you can just go, wow, they're just really polished and really articulate.
I guess this pursuit of perfection, call it that. And when you have too much of that, we start to want the imperfections again, because I guess it's, we call it the uncanny valley. When something starts sounding more familiar to us, then we start to believe it more. But I think we're moving towards that more imperfection now rather than super polished media as well.
Yeah. Yeah, just that recognition that we're human. We make mistakes all the time, and that's okay.
And I think it's nice. I think it's important to be aware of that. And I think as AI improves and we start to see this, I think people are going to want to crave the more human side of the content as well, because they want to feel that connection of imperfection, or through the imperfection. Yeah. So what do you believe is the future for AI? What would you like to see in future? And I guess in relation to that as well, you mentioned at the start, at Melbourne Uni, you have an internal large language model. Melbourne Water has a specific stance as well on generative AI. I guess tying that all together, what would you like to see in future?
Yeah, I think in answering that question, I would like to step back a little bit, because I think that yes, AI is here to stay, and AI has the potential to deliver enormous benefits. But I think that it's really important that we proceed thoughtfully, that we don't rush towards the benefits without assessing the potential negative impacts of AI. So what I would like to see is more transparency in reporting. At the moment, there's very little requirement for tech companies to report on their energy and water demands. And this is problematic because people can't make informed choices. I think people's awareness is growing of the energy and water demands of data centers and where they're being built. But unless we've got transparency in reporting, it's really hard for people to make informed decisions about how they use AI. I think there's also some questions around equity. How do we ensure that the underlying data is representative and not biased towards, for example, Western society or men? And how do we ensure that there's equitable distribution of the profits and the benefits of AI? I think I would really like to see, and I don't know how we do this, us making societal decisions about the types of AI that we want and don't want to have. So do we want to be making decisions about, yes, we want to use AI that's environmentally and socially beneficial and not be using it for the opposite? I think that it's really important that there's education and legislation and regulation. And this is really challenging because the pace of AI development far outstrips the pace at which legislation and regulation can be developed and implemented. And it's also global, so it extends beyond political and geographic jurisdiction. So it's a huge challenge. I don't have the answers. I don't know, not even close to having the answers to all of those things. But I think that with growing awareness, we hopefully can move towards addressing some of those challenges.
No, indeed.
I think pulling it back to what I would like to, the things that I'm going to explore next, I'm really interested in some of that supported analysis that it can help with, in particular things like qualitative data. And I'm really interested in these new functions around creating 3D models and if, for example, a 3D model of how urban development negatively impacts streams to help with my storytelling.
That's very interesting. I know that area is developing very quickly. And we also have a lot of AI use in architecture now for the visualization of ideas. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to also apply this to solving environmental problems or creating awareness around environmental challenges that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I think, like most people, I think in pictures, and I'd really see some real scope in using generative AI to help me get those pictures out of my head and share them with other people.
So I look forward to seeing the tablecloth being draped over the landscape. Let me know when you've generated the 3D model of that. I think cloth physics, in 3D visualization has advanced quite substantially. So you'll hopefully get a very accurate representation.
I hope so.
But either way, I think the messages are clear. We had a pretty interesting episode generated across 22 sources that I think in the time it took to generate it, you wouldn't even have finished reading one of the shortest sources. So it's definitely very powerful, but use it at your own risk and use it with a lot of scrutiny and a lot of care. Vet the contents before you put it out. And yeah, I think that's important. As long as we keep that critical reflection and that critical thinking, I think we can do a lot of amazing things with the tools that we have at our disposal.
Oh, absolutely. And even if we use these tools as starting points to help us think about creating our own story, and it seems such an efficient way of distilling the important information from such a large body of information and turning that into a compelling story to share, I think that it's so helpful for that. And I'm really looking forward to exploring this space further.
No, definitely. And thank you very much, Belinda, for joining me on this experiment and also for providing the sources and also the idea to do this experiment. I know I wanted to do one with a lot of sources, but you gave me the perfect example. And I think also around a topic that is incredibly important and that we should raise more awareness about.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a real pleasure to be here. And I've learned a lot myself. And, as I said to you, the reason that I really wanted to do this was to explore the role of storytelling in headwater stream management. And I've learned a lot. I'm going to take away a lot from this.
No, definitely. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on yet another episode of the mini series. I hope you also took away a lot of interesting lessons and new ideas for playing with NotebookLM yourself, using your own sources. So yeah, thanks for tuning in and also tuning in to the regular episodes on the Grand Challenges podcast.
If you like this episode or the show in general, follow it on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from to be notified of the latest release as soon as it becomes available. Check out the show notes and many other episodes over at petermbach.com/podcast or join the LinkedIn group and share your thoughts.
The podcast's intro and outro song for this mini-series is called Funky Fortune by Danny Shields.
Stay tuned for our next episode in this mini-series to find out more about how AI may or may not tackle the grand challenges